1966, Joan Margaret Myring was a married mother of 2 young children living in Blackpool. On the 8th of July, she reported her son had slipped in the bath and was unconscious. When emergency services got to the address, they found both children unresponsive. The children were rushed to the hospital, but unfortunately, any medical intervention was too late, and both children were declared dead. But what really happened that fateful day? Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Students' Verdict podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Emily. This podcast will cover a wide range of interesting true crime cases that will include historical cases, which I have a personal interest in, miscarriages of justice, missing persons cases, cold cases, and alike. Please follow us on Instagram at the Student Verdict blog and on Twitter at Student Verdict. Resources used in this episode will always be linked in the show notes. Now, on to today's episode. Our case today begins with Joan Margaret Coop, as she was formerly known. Joan Margaret Coop was born in Blackpool on the 12th of March 1939, and she was one of 5 children. Her parents separated when she was young, and her mother tragically passed away a few years later. Joan was placed in a convent where she received her education. She remained here until she was 15 years old, following which she left the convent and moved in with her grandmother. Joan attended a nursing course. However, during her second year of studies, she was admitted as a patient to Lancaster Moor Hospital, formerly known as the Lancaster Lunatic Asylum. This would be the first of a number of admissions to Lancaster Moor Hospital for Joan Coop. Following her admission on the 1st of March 1956, she was then discharged and went to live with her grandmother. She also secured a job on a farm. She remained employed until September 1957, when she went back to Lancaster Moor Hospital. She was discharged again in June 1958, following which she returned to her former residence and obtained work with a local market gardener. She remained employed until September 1960, when she was admitted to Lancaster Moor Hospital for a 3rd time. She was discharged in December 1960 and continued with her employment for 12 months before remaining at home. Joan married Robert Myring in March 1963. After their marriage, the couple moved to 8 Rough Hayes Lane, Blackpool. Joan and Robert would go on to have 2 children together, Stephen Robert Myring, born on the 23rd of June 1964, and Gillian Edith Myring, born on the 18th of September 1965. To everyone who knew them, they were a seemingly ordinary family. Before we get into the day of the incident, I'd like us to have a look at the events which took place the day before. According to the witness statement of Mary Cunningham, Joan's grandmother and Stephen and Gillian's great-grandmother, on the 7th of July 1966, Joan went over to her grandmother's house on Lindsay Avenue with the children. She then went out, leaving Gillian and Stephen with their great-grandmother. Mary was cutting dead roses in the garden, whilst Gillian was in her pram in the sunshine. Stephen was also in the garden. Mary had tied a piece of string around his waist to stop him moving too far, which, I'm going to be honest, I've not heard of that technique before, but there we go. As Mary looked up to check on her great-grandchildren, she noticed that Stephen was feeding rose petals to Gillian. Mary rushed over, and when she got to Stephen, the rose petals were sticky. He also had a small brown bottle in his hand. She cleaned out the girl's mouth and cleaned Stephen's face and hands. Gillian was shivering, so Mary made her a bottle. The little girl drank it and went to sleep. Joan came and picked the children up between 7 and 7:30 p.m. that evening. Both children seemed to be all right at this time. Mary would not have thought twice about letting the children return home with their mother. She had no cause for concern. She could not have known that this would be the last time she would see her great-grandchildren alive. We're now going to discuss the events which took place on the day of the incident, that being the 8th of July 1966. According to Mary Cunningham's witness statement, between 1 and 1:10 p.m, Joan burst into Mary's home. Mary described Joan as being red in the face, as if she'd been running. Joan shouted, quote, "Stephen has fallen in the bath and I can't get him round. He's gone cold like my mother." Mary told Joan to phone the ambulance, which she did. Joan also spoke to Mr. Davies, an inspector in Blackpool police force who lived a few houses away, and the three of them went to 8 Rough Hayes Lane. When they arrived, a police officer, PC John Hilton, was already outside the address. PC Hilton and Joan made their way to the back door of the property, which was unlocked. The couple made their way through the kitchen and up the stairs to the back bedroom. When Mary made her way into the house, she found Stephen in the back bedroom, wrapped in a blanket, lying on the double bed. The boy was unresponsive, and as she tried to bring him round, Mary noticed soapy water coming from the boy's mouth. She turned him over and more soapy water came out. PC Hilton noted that the boy's arms were taking on a mottled appearance, and Inspector Davies commented that it appeared to him that the boy was quite dead. When the ambulance attendants took the boy away, the inspector noticed a wet stain on the mattress near to where the boy's head had been. Inspector Davies was informed that the girl, Gillian, was in the front bedroom. As he walked in, he saw a large double bed in the centre of the room, and on the right-hand side of the bed was a small carry cot. Gillian was lying in the cot on her left side wearing a vest and a soiled nappy. There was also a bottle by her face. Joan came in, and as she picked Gillian up, PC Hilton noted that the girl made a gurgling, gasping sound. There was moisture on the child's face and on her hair on the left side. Moisture could be found on the carry cot underneath where the child had been lying. PC Hilton attempted to revive Gillian through mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and one of the ambulance attendants gave her oxygen, but her condition did not change. Both children were then taken to hospital. As part of the investigation, Inspector Davies examined the bath at 8 Rough Hayes Lane, after Joan had claimed that her son had slipped. The bath did not contain any water, but there were particles of moisture. There was no soap in the bath, but there was some in the wash basin to the right-hand side. He then contacted Joan's husband, Robert Myring, and took him to Victoria Hospital. Dr. Suresh Chowdhury, a medical practitioner, was on duty at 1:45 p.m. at Victoria Hospital when the Myring children arrived by ambulance. Staff at the hospital attempted cardiac massage on Stephen. The doctor noted that froth was still coming out of the boy's mouth and realised that there were no signs of life. A nurse was also trying cardiac massage on Gillian. Dr. Chowdhury took over, and although there was no froth as with Stephen, it was clear that the little girl was dead too. Now, before we get into the post-mortem, I would like to preface this by saying that there is a lot of medical jargon in this section, and I am far from medically trained, although, fun fact, I am a qualified first aider, but I apologise if I pronounce any terms incorrectly. Dr. John Banstead, a Home Office pathologist and registered medical practitioner, conducted the post-mortem on Gillian and Stephen Myring. The post-mortem on Stephen started at 7:30 p.m. on the 8th of July 1966. The boy was 2 feet 10 inches in height. Dr. Banstead noted old scars present on the back of the right upper arm, on the right side of the small of the back, and above the right buttock. Froth exuded from the boy's mouth, and the end of his tongue was bitten. Rigor mortis was fully developed, with dark post-mortem lividity present on the back. According to Dr. Banstead's witness statement, the undersurface of the scalp showed 5 bruises. The brain itself was bloodless, and the windpipe contained watery froth. Stephen's lungs filled his chest and were frothing and bloodless. Dr. Banstead concluded that the cause of death in Stephen's case was drowning in water. Dr. Banstead began his examination of Gillian Myring at 9 p.m. on the 8th of July 1966. She was 2 feet 4 inches in height. Dr. Banstead noted that she had slight nappy rash and small scratches were present on the nape and on the right side of the neck. Rigor mortis was fully developed, and there was dark post-mortem staining present on the little girl's back. Gillian's lungs were contracted and showed collapse of the posterior part. The lung substance was congested, and the surfaces showed scanty pinpoint hemorrhages. The stomach contained a small quantity of semi-solid residue, and both the stomach and the intestines emitted a pungent odour. Dr. Banstead was unable to determine the cause of Gillian's death, but he was satisfied that she had not died from natural causes. He concluded that the cause of death was poisoning by malathion 60. Malathion 60 is an insecticide. Dr. Banstead researched cases where the insecticide malathion had been ingested and found that symptoms occurred within 2 hours of ingestion or less. In one case, symptoms were known to have occurred within 3 hours. Even though treatment was given, in 2 cases death still occurred. The main symptom attributable to pure malathion is paralysis. Dr. George Manning, a registered medical practitioner and consultant pathologist, reviewed Dr. Banstead's report and agreed that Stephen's collapse in the bath was consistent with having been overcome by the ingestion of malathion 60. Cholinesterase is a substance which, in very simple terms, allows nerves to work. Malathion 60 destroys cholinesterase, and the nerves then cease to work. The result of this? Paralysis. Having read the evidence of the incident in Mary's garden, where Stephen was feeding rose petals to Gillian, Dr. Manning concluded that contamination from this incident could not have had anything to do with their deaths, because symptoms would have been seen within a shorter time, certainly within 2 hours. To quote Dr. Manning, all the indications are that the 2 children ingested the malathion 60 after 8 a.m. on the 8th of July, 1966. Dr. John Mullen, a part of the Home Office Forensic Science Lab, conducted the analysis on the exhibits collected as part of the police investigation. An 8-ounce camp coffee bottle collected from 8 Rough Hayes Lane contained 65 millilitres of malathion 60. Detergent was also present, giving a liquid of milky appearance. Eric Hargreaves confirmed that there were no decipherable fingerprints of either child on the bottle. No traces of malathion 60 were found in any of the feeding bottles or on the teaspoon or bedclothes. However, there was evidence of malathion 60 on the neck of Gillian's nightdress. Dr. Mullen found malathion in Gillian's intestines to the extent of 150 to 200 milligrams. That's approximately a quarter of a teaspoonful, so quite a significant amount. Traces were found in her other organs as well, including her stomach, liver, kidneys, and part of the brain. Cholinesterase activity was completely inhibited in Gillian. In Stephen's body, Dr. Mullen found approximately 15 milligrams of malathion in the intestines, and although the cholinesterase was diminished, it was not completely inhibited. I'd like to discuss the children's father now. I know we haven't talked about him too much. You may be wondering where he was on the day that his children died. A colleague of Robert's, Robert Garrett, who I'll be referring to as Garrett to avoid confusion, was also a gardener employed by the Parks Department and had been working with Robert on the 8th of July 1966. Garrett first saw Robert at 8 a.m. when he arrived at the yard. Robert went for lunch at 12 and was back from lunch at 1 p.m. Robert and Garrett continued to work together until he left later that afternoon. Sarah Myring, Robert's mother, confirmed that her son would come to her house for lunch in the week. On the 8th of July, he arrived at her house for lunch at 12:10 p.m., arriving by bicycle. He then left between 12:40 and 12:45 p.m. So what of the children's mother? Kathleen Helm, a registered medical practitioner, had known Joan since she was a patient in 1954. On the 1st of March 1956, Joan went to Lancaster Moor Hospital as a voluntary patient. Following examinations and assessments, Joan was diagnosed as having schizophrenia. She was treated with modified insulin and was discharged on the 28th of June 1956 with a recommendation that she attend a psychiatric clinic. On the 24th of September 1957, Joan again went back to Lancaster Moor Hospital as a voluntary patient, where she received electroconvulsive therapy and deep insulin coma therapy. Electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT, is done under general anesthesia. It involves passing small electric currents through the brain, which triggers a brief seizure. ECT causes changes in the brain's chemistry that can, in some cases, reverse symptoms of certain mental health conditions. Insulin coma therapy, also referred to as insulin shock therapy, involved injecting patients with large doses of insulin in order to produce daily comas over several weeks. This treatment was used mainly for the treatment of schizophrenia in the 1940s and 50s, before falling out of favor and being replaced by